also be honest, right? So I did quit at the peak of my earning power. I did like my first investment, which was actually in an airport because I was at a point, I don't know, like I said, there was like a switch that flipped, right? And I was like so urgent to put my money into the market that I did it like just hours before
A flight.
the flight. Once the ladder has been removed, like what's left of me, because so much of me was over indexed on work, on the job, right?
So back to what I was saying. Could be us.
So today we're exploring a question that doesn't get asked often enough, at least in my opinion, right? Which is what happens after you hit financial freedom? The more common term that people like to use is FIRE, right? For those who don't know, FIRE stands for Financial Independence, Retire Early. So joining us today is Jalyn. So Jalyn is a former design leader and now full-time what I call pursuer of hobbies and personal growth. So she'll be sharing with us her early years of saving and investing, the challenges she's faced along the way, and what it really feels like to live a life of financial freedom. So thanks so much for joining us on the Beansprout podcast, Jalyn.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me on. I think it's really exciting to sort of talk about this topic with other people. I think it's money is usually a very sensitive and a very layered conversation with a lot of people, right? So it's always nice to unpack what that means for everyone, yeah.
You're 36 years old this year, right?
I am, yes.
And I think it's not very common to hear of someone who's 36 and who has reached financial freedom. Of course, this is in your own definition, and we can unpack a little bit more of that later. But maybe to start us off, tell us, what does your life look like right now as a 36-year-old who is financially free?
Well, I guess on a day-to-day, if we're going on like the very micro look at it, it's a lot of figuring out what I want to do with that day. So I usually started out with, taking care of my body. So I usually go for a run or to the gym, just taking care of that in the morning. And the rest of the day it's either pursuing a hobby like I said, like sort of having that time to really spend on those things rather than having a big chunk of the day being taken up by a 9 to 5, or back when I was working it was more like a 12-hour work day, right? So and I'm spending also a lot of time with family. So I've got 2 nephews. They are 7. So it's a lot of trying to cherish the time with them as they are this small, and just before they think it's uncool to spend time with their aunt.
Right.
Yeah.
And was this something that you've only started to pay attention to when you reach FIRE, or was it something that before FIRE, it was things that were on your mind, but you didn't have actually as much time to spend on these things?
Yeah, so I think more like the second option, right?
Yeah.
Where it's obviously a thing where people want to take care of their bodies, want to spend time with loved ones and family. But like I said, it's the time.
Yeah.
It's so hard to find. Like I always call it outlook Jenga, right? Like you're trying to fit something in there, and then if you pull something out, then maybe something sort of shifts. Maybe your meeting's overrun and you can't really commit to what you're going to spend. Like say, it's really easy to be like, oh, the day is so busy, I don't really want to go to the gym anymore, for example. Yeah. So it's a thing where it's always an idealistic life, like back before when the job was still taking place, versus now where it's more intentional.
So actually one thing that I'm very curious about is that obviously you didn't become financially free overnight, right? There was a whole journey that led up to that. And I'm curious, being in this life stage right now, actually how does it compare to, when you were working towards it, right? What's that expectation versus reality like for you?
Yeah. But it's also a thing where, it is still your life and it's still a day that you spend. And I think I've fallen prey to that as well, right? Which is, I thought with financial freedom, you get, all of this time, all of these opportunities to do what you want to do. And it is going to be like a sunshine every day, like, wow, it's like so much of everything.
Yeah.
But the reality is it is not a switch that you toggle on and off, right? And there are a lot of mindsets that need to be reframed. For example, just trying to understand who I am outside of my work and the job that I had, the titles that I had, even in the pursuit of, like, say, the career ladder, right? once the ladder has been removed, like what's left of me, because so much of me was over indexed on
Right.
work, on the job, right?
Right.
So,
Is it like when there's a ladder, you know what you're working towards, but without the ladder, it's kind of like, then what?
yeah, that's right. So, you know, it's also a lot of trying to figure out what the quote unquote metrics are.
Right.
Yeah, you know, is it, like I said, are you spending the time productively? Right. But also not trying to fall into that trap as well.
Where every single minute has to be like productivized, basically, right? But that's really the mindset that we have, because we're structured in a way where that's our day, right? We have the regular 9 to 5 that you're used to, and then now that you don't have the 9 to 5, then you have to sort of impose that 9 to 5, right? So you go from like being in a very structured environment to something that's a little bit more unstructured. For some people, that can be quite intimidating or a bit scary, right?
It is.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think for me as well, right? So I came from a very like structured day. I mean, obviously with the work stuff, and as I was starting this start of like, I call it a sabbatical, but you know, I hadn't actually realized that I hit financial freedom when I quit my job, to be honest. And yeah, so back then in the first few weeks and the first few months, I was really trying to keep that structure. I was trying to be like, okay, I gotta fit the fitness stuff in. I gotta fit the time to do this. I gotta figure out what the next thing is that's gonna bring me the money, so I don't feel this stressed out about money and all of that. I guess it's part of my brain, the way that it's wired, that it needed that structure. But you know, a few months into it, after the realization that actually I have enough to be exploring some of this stuff, I did a tiny experiment where I removed all structure from my day, and
Wow.
you know, I woke up, you know, whenever I wanted.
Right.
I did whatever I wanted, or what I thought I wanted to do. And I think out of that experiment, I actually realized that I am someone who needs structure, because all I did was the doom scrolling, right? Without that structure, there's no way of figuring out what I want that day to look like. And it felt like it was a no holes barred like thing. And
Right.
without those holes, sort of turned into a puddle on the floor.
Right. I think it's a little bit like when people talk about creativity, and people associate the word freedom with creativity a lot, right?
Yeah.
And it's like the freedom to do anything that you want.
Yes.
But actually, creativity comes in when you have constraints,
Yes.
right? And it sounds like that's sort of what happened with you as well.
Yeah.
I would like to talk a little bit more about that, but you know, for the people who are listening, they might be curious to know, okay, so you're financially free now, but how did you actually get to this point? So maybe could you walk us through, you know, some of the, I guess, earlier stages of your career? And from what I understand, you started out, you've always been in the creative field, right?
Yeah.
And I think for many people in that field, it can sometimes seem quite daunting to save up, because people
Yes.
in creative industries don't earn a lot, right?
Yes.
So what were those early years like for you, and how, you know, what was trying to save and work towards financial freedom? What was the experience like for you?
I like to say, right, so I've got 15 years of a career that I started sort of right after the great the crash of the markets in the
Asian well, is it not the Asian, the
No,
the
the
2008 the
yeah.
2008 financial crisis.
Correct. Yeah. So I graduated sort of out of that market crash, which meant that there weren't a lot of jobs for the picking. So for the first few years of that life, my first job, I actually earned 1.6K a month. So, you know, what you were saying about the creative field not paying much, I think that's obviously, even inflation adjusted, I don't think it's something that is, Singapore doesn't have a minimum wage, but if we did have it, that would be quite I think a sad sum,
Yeah.
right? So, but it's also strange because the mindset that I had when I was, earning that much, I don't remember being stressed about money at that point. I think it was more whatever's coming in. I wasn't tracking my finances per se. I wasn't really doing sort of savings. I think back then, you know, not knowing much about personal finance and savings and all of those things, right? So even the thought of retirement or I don't think FIRE was probably starting at that point, but as a concept, it seemed so foreign to someone who was earning so little, because I remember being on Reddit, you know, and seeing that the basics of finance, or rather the basics of FIRE being explained, like in very simple terms, right? Where they're like, okay, you can save $1 million and you can withdraw 4%, and that's how you achieve that that state. And I remember looking at it and closing the tab because I was like, yeah, I'm never gonna hit that $1 million because with the 1.6K a month, that was obviously not something
Feels
that.
so out of reach.
Yeah, definitely out of reach. It wasn't even out of like reach, right? It wasn't even like anywhere close.
Not even in your universe.
Yeah,
basically.
exactly. Yeah, it's like another star system.
Yeah.
Yeah. So but thankfully, after that first job, there were a few more steps in the career where it built me up to, I wouldn't say like a high-paying position either. So more stable in terms of I was at Singtel, so it was something like I said, it was stable. It was work that I enjoyed doing with people that I enjoy working with as well. And around 2017 or 2018 was when FIRE came up as a topic again. And again, it must have been something where I was doom scrolling again, right? And then seeing these concepts. And I think at that point, still no idea of how my expenses looked like, even though I know it was quite horrendous because we were going out for Starbucks every day, for example. We were talking about the 5-day work week being outside and needing something to spice up the day, right? So obviously a lot of the expenses were, there was a lot going out. There wasn't, I guess, like a tracking mechanism at that point.
So at some point it flipped, right? Like you
Yes.
went from this person who wasn't looking at your numbers, you weren't looking at your bank account, you were like, I was only earning 1,600, like how can I even FIRE? And then to 2018, you are looking at it again. And what exactly was, what caused that flip to like, this is something I want to try doing?
It was, the trigger was definitely all the content being consumed, right? So there were a lot of people who were starting up the podcasts and blogs about how they are starting on their journey to FIRE as well. But back then it was a lot more US centric. So they were talking a lot about their own sort of tax advantage systems, a lot of like their Fidelity, Vanguard, all of that.
Very contextualized for the
For the US, yeah.
Yeah, so I remember having consumed all of this content, being like, man, I wish we had such index funds in Singapore, because back then there weren't the brokerages or the sort of robo-advisors that we have right now that that offered the opportunity for people to do the
Investing at like a low cost, right?
Correct,
Like,
yeah.
You probably need more money back then to do it. Yeah.
Yeah. I remember the commissions being quite large when I did like my first investment, which was actually in an airport because I was at a point, I don't know, like I said, there was like a switch that flipped, right? And I was like so urgent to put my money into the market that I did it like just hours before
A flight.
a flight.
Oh,
Yes.
wow,
I was
okay.
like, oh, I got it. And back then the transfer of money took some time
Yes.
from like this and that. So I was in the lounge. I was like, okay, I got to do this. I remember it being like 11 p.m. As well. So that was a first memory tied to the investment.
It's like a core memory already.
Yeah.
And after that, what changed in your life?
I think what changed, one of the biggest changes then was actually a job hop, right? So that's definitely one of the things that people, I don't want to say ignore, but it's definitely a vehicle that allowed me to save a lot more as I'm going along. Because if I had stayed at a certain job, then the jump to the next positions, those yielded so much more in terms of like the benefits and the salaries that had definitely helped and accelerated the savings journey. Yeah. So I think there's also like a lot of I think maybe much more in the Asian context as well, where people want to feel loyal in the job, right? Or they want to feel like, maybe I got to stick it out to this company for like the next 3 years, because this is what the default sort of path is for being in a job. So I think one of the biggest changes was actually making those decisions based on, the trajectory that would be growing.
Right. So basically you had this flip, right? So you thought, okay, I want to take charge of my finances because you like the idea of financial freedom, buying back your time. And then you felt this urgent need to do it, so much so that you were like, okay, I got to do it at the airport itself while I'm like flying off somewhere. I need to make this trade. If not, like, I suppose it would be like a procrastination thing, right?
Yeah, I can
like you didn't
imagine.
build.
Yeah, probably you're thinking if I don't do it now, I'll never do it. Yeah.
Yeah, and then I guess things fell in place then. Since then, like you had some systems or frameworks, because I understand that you come from a product and user experience or user design background, and usually people who are in that background tend to think in like frameworks and systems and things like that. So was that something that you took from, let's say, your working environment, from your experience, and then implemented it for your finances, or was it like the other way around, or how did you go about that bit?
I guess it's sort of symbiotic as well, right? So as I was growing in my position, as I was growing in my skills as a product person, I was also using those skills back into my life, and it felt like a novelty thing to my brain at the time. You know, just being able to be seeing how the systems that work for corporations and businesses and the products that you're pushing, how that can be translated to your own life, you know, and I think like maybe very specifically with like the money, with like the systemizing, I think it's more of automation, right? And being able to not care about it. Because there's a lot of human psychology. I think, you know, if I look at, it's at an all-time high right now, right? And, you know, maybe if I wait a bit, it's going to fall a bit, and then I can make that decision. If you automate it, if you set up the system around it, then you are taking that decision away from you, and, you know, you don't get to procrastinate, because it's gonna go whether you want to or not.
So I guess in finance, there's a term for that, which is dollar cost averaging, right? You're putting a fixed amount in every month into your investment, so that no matter if it's a high or a low, that you're buying in, and you're maintaining that discipline as a habit. But it's done automatically, and you take the emotion out of it, right?
Correct,
basically.
It's interesting you say that. So you were spending a lot of time working in the last 15 years, but you also, because one of the excuses that I always hear people talk about is that I have no time to invest because I'm working all the time. So they're like really focused on their careers, but you were able to still do that while focusing on your job. So that's where the automation came in, right? So basically the moral of the story is that you still can invest and still put money towards your freedom.
Yes.
Even if you're like really focused in your job right now.
Yeah. I think if you're really focused on your job, I think the automation makes even more sense, right? Because then you are building up your well of your money, and, you know, and that gives you that peace of mind to pursue, like, you know, if working really hard is what you want to be doing, because that is what this season of life means to you, then you don't have to grapple with like the emotional logic behind, oh, should I invest now? You know, this is so overwhelming, I don't know what to do. There are a lot of acronyms, there are a lot of different fees. Why is this platform doing this to me? You know, all of these different things are taken out when you have your systems there, you automate it, and, you know, you don't have to log into your app every single day to see whether things are moving, right? Because you are given that peace of mind that at the end of this, however many years that you want to be invested for, that is the system that you have, and, you know, you have the confidence that it's gonna tide you to that point.
On that note, I'm curious, what does your investment approach look like now? Right? I mean, of course, now you're not drawing a full-time salary like you used to. I'm assuming there's some drawdown that's happening, right?
Yes.
Has your approach to investing shifted? Or in what ways has that happened for you?
Right. So with all that talk about systems and automation, I think obviously without the stable amount of money that's coming in at the period, I've stopped the automation, obviously. But there's also so much nuance and so much difference in the way that I think people who are at this stage of drawing down, there are so many different frameworks that people are talking about. There's like, oh, you gotta keep this bucket strategy, right? You gotta keep cash here, you gotta keep like bonds, you gotta keep like, you know, all of these different I guess vehicles of your money. I think for me, what I have is I've got cash that is in a money market fund that is tiding me over for the next few years. So this is something that would hopefully, if the markets crash, it means that I don't have to withdraw from the actual investments, right? But the drawback of that is that it is not earning in the market. And I think genuinely that's something that I'm like fretting. Okay, I want to say fretting, but it's on my mind, right? I'm like, oh, this is like a sum of money that could be in the market, but it's not because it's serving this other purpose. So I've got to keep reminding myself what that purpose is, which is for security, right? Versus growth at all costs.
Okay, got to stay grounded.
Yes. Yeah. So it's a lot of like trying to figure out what is comfortable to you, and yeah. So I mean, in terms of like the investment strategy, so what I have is enough for me to do my expenses and have a good sum of money to do my hobbies, pursuing and all of those. Whatever extras coming in, I would also try to see if I need it for, say, the next 3 months or 6 months. If not, if it's a big enough lump sum for me, I would put it back into the market.
Right.
Okay. So you're still continuing to invest, just that there's this separate pile of cash that you're using for your more immediate needs, and as basically as your runway.
As my runway, my hedge for markets filling, for any sort of black swan events that might happen.
Right. Okay, that's quite sensible, especially when you're retiring early, right? Because the timeline of your retirement period, I mean, assuming that you are not going back to a job or anything like that, you're just drawing down from your portfolio, is actually a lot longer than someone who goes on the traditional retirement path of like retiring at, like, they say 60, right? Then their time frame is shorter, and therefore even if they have like a bigger chunk of money, that's more money that they can spend in a shorter period of time, right?
Yeah. So I think the mindset there is also that, I've done it before, and even if everything crashes, even if something big happens in the markets, right? I think it's more of having the confidence that I will be able to do it again. Yeah. So
Could you say a bit more about, that bit about staying grounded, right? Because I'm sure comparing your portfolio today to what it used to be, there's some difference, right?
Actually, no. So for this year, we've got that big April dip because of the tariffs and all of that, right? But even accounting for expenses, I am still level from when I actually quit. So I think that's also given me some sort of confidence.
Right.
Yes, 9 months is a very short period of time to be looking at it. I think across that whole 50-year period that we're looking at. But I've also read from other people that they retired like 4 years ago and their portfolio has actually grown. So
actually that makes sense.
Yes. Yeah. So like we were talking about at the beginning of the conversation about the 4%. They call it the 4% rule, but it's mostly like a guideline, right? Like some people might do like a 6% and they're comfortable with it. I also know people who are very like risk adverse, and they're like 2.5% is what my target would be.
Right.
So for them, for me, it's a range of like, I think I can do between 3 to 6%, and just looking at historical data of the markets, I think should still be viable, be okay to ride through.
Okay.
Yeah. So for me, as someone who is not pursuing FIRE, right, I'm just wondering, when you were on this path, would you say that you are enjoying it?
I would say that I enjoyed it on a conceptual level, right? Because I was on a conceptual level in terms of, yes, in X number of years. At that time it was like something like when I'm 40, I will hit an exact number, and that's when I would be financially free, and everything will work out, happily. I think in practice it looked a little different. Someone looking in, right? I remember a junior at work, like we were talking about holiday plans, and then apparently I said to him, "Nah, I'm not going for any holidays today because I gotta hit my savings rate."
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. So
you were that disciplined.
I don't know about discipline, but it's more of, I don't remember saying that, and I don't remember that being my mindset. But apparently it's so ingrained in me that that's a target, I gotta hit it, and that's the end of the story, right? No fun, nothing, just the number. So conceptually, I think I enjoyed the pursuit of it. Numbers going up is obviously a fun thing to see.
Yes.
In practice, exhibited behaviors that I didn't know that I was,
Yeah.
that, didn't necessarily scream that I was having fun.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's so interesting because a lot of people, I mean, as someone who's also consuming a lot of personal finance content, and I also see people who have also fired and they become an inspiration to other people, right? So you go on like Reddit threads and things like that. Singapore has a Reddit thread, Singapore FI,
Yes.
where people are aspiring to financial freedom. And there seems to be this romanticization that, financial freedom is the goal, and everything that you do leading up to it, the sacrifices that you have to make, it's like worth it for that number. And then when you hit that number, then you have this sort of like, okay, now I've hit this number, now what?
Right.
Which is what you're explaining earlier, right? About the whole like the structure and everything. Can you give your experience and sense of that? Leading up to fire and then hitting that number, how that felt like, and then what happened after that?
I have this concept in my mind, right, where you're building this fortress of your money, and that's like the whole principle of fire, where you have a certain amount of money that's multiplied by or rather 25% of your annual expenses, and once you hit that number, that means you've hit fire, right, for the rest of your life.
So 25% of your annual expenses.
25 times of your
Oh,
annual expenses.
Okay, sorry. So 25 times of your annual
Yeah.
expenses.
So that's like traditional fire. That's
Okay.
how people get their number,
Right.
because that's how we have a 4% withdrawal rate,
Okay.
and that is derived from studies from
So to be clear, this is traditional fire, right?
is
Because I
traditional.
remember,
Yeah.
Nicole, we were having this conversation about how today there are so many versions of fire. There's
Yes.
lean fire, fat fire.
This is
Coast fire, barista
yeah,
fire.
yeah. So this is essentially like, okay, I want to quit my job and be able to sustain myself for X number of years thereafter without a job,
Yes.
right? So you need to hit 25 times your annual expenses. And then once you've hit that number, you draw down basically 4% of your portfolio each year
Yes.
to help fund your retirement, essentially. I mean, for the audience to know
Yeah.
what exactly we're talking about,
Yeah.
essentially that's what it is, right?
Yeah, so that's the traditional view of fire, right?
Yeah.
Where that's how it started. That's how the mathematical models and all. But I think I want to flip it on the head a little bit as well. So in terms of looking at it, if what's your definition of a minimum viable freedom? Like to you, it is not about hitting that number, right? It is about all the rest of the stuff in your life that you can do that would make you experience that freedom, versus this one number that you have to hit before you start living life, because you've employed 100% of your energy and your time and your money into that one specific number that you forget how to live, basically.
Yeah, you didn't even go for holiday that year.
Yes. Yeah, so that's how I've been reframing fire a bit as well. So instead of that one specific number, how do you know what your minimum viable freedom is for
Yeah.
you? Yeah, and how
Yeah.
you can prototype it, for example, for yourself, and being able to see if that's something that you actually want, because like I said, a lot of like Reddit threads of people who've achieved fire, right? And they're like, I don't know what to do with my time, right?
Yeah. And I think we were chatting about this earlier, right? Like 36 is not old at all, right? And supposedly this is the time of your life where for many people at this age, it is like peak earning power time,
Yes.
right? It is peak like opportunity time. And some people might wonder, why are you not sort of exploiting that to the fullest? I mean, what is your response to that?
Okay, I will also be honest, right? So I did quit at the peak of my earning power. So 2024 was when I officially stopped earning that full-time income, and 2024 was the year that it's the highest income that I've had across my entire career, right? So I think with respect to that question of like why I'm doing it, because we're talking about career ladders, right?
Yeah.
And ladders are, very stable. You've got rungs, you've got, one direction to crawl up on. I think for me, that is one way to think about your career, your life, purpose and stuff like that. But for me, I think right now, I want to explore what the constellation of other things I can do looks like. versus this one path up? Are there, things that can relate to one another? It doesn't have to be job related, for example, right? It can be the opportunities that rise up. Doesn't have to be a specific skill related in the job description that you see on LinkedIn. Yeah. So that's how I'm seeing it, because your whole life is not your job. And there are other things that you can be exploring, and it might come up as an opportunity that might even eclipse what you were doing with your work as well.
Yeah, I really love the use of the word constellation.
And I like the idea that you mentioned earlier about the minimum viable freedom, right? Because that also applies to someone who is also working now, and they think that, like, my life is miserable now because I am not retired, like I'm not fired, right? I'm not financially independent, and I feel miserable and I have to go to work. But that's not necessarily the case, right? Like you can still find pockets of being able to do that freedom in different ways. But how do you balance that with, let's say, going to Starbucks every day, and then making the assumption like, okay, or making the excuse that, okay, this is my minimum viable freedom is to buy a Starbucks coffee every day. So how do you balance that in terms of, what's your minimum viable freedom, and what can you do to delay that gratification so that you can achieve financial stability and financial independence?
I guess that is a tightrope that you have to be on yourself. Definitely easily justifiable. I want to buy something big, and this is my idea of freedom, and that's how I do it, right? I think one of the important things that you have to ask yourself as you're defining minimum viable freedom to you is, what is enough for you at this moment, right? And as the name sort of implies as well, minimum viable product comes from like a very product lens, and leaning on that framework, right? Your 1.0 looks different from the iterations that you will do in the future. So it isn't that you've got a vision of something and then you're locked in for that for the rest of your life. Like, this is the thing that I said I would do 20 years ago, and this is the only thing that I can do. So it's a lot of like experimenting of what you can be doing to build up to that vision. So I mean, if it is daily Starbucks drinks that you think is able to give you that freedom, I think, if that is what makes you happy, and you've worked it into your budget, you've worked it into how it can actually support you in terms of like your financial like your savings and all of that, then you could try it for, say, 2 months and see if that actually really makes you more happy, probably.
So what I'm hearing is that even when you have this sense of like, okay, what is the things that you value that gives you freedom, that also has to come within a framework, right? That also has to come within like systems, and you build those systems up so that you're able to do that more sustainably. And we've been talking a lot about systems and frameworks, and one thing that Jalyn mentioned earlier, and I've read about you as well on our blog, on our website about Your Money Diaries, is that you have this system called the
full stack.
The full stack system.
Yes.
And maybe you can explain a little bit more about that.
I guess the genesis of that, right, is back thousands of years ago. The Greeks maybe have figured it out. They were trying to classify what sort of happiness are, in terms of, is it something that would give you a more fulfilled life? Right. So it's something called eudaimonia, where, you are happy because you're in the pursuit of something, right? Rather than
as opposed to having arrived at.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. So it's something that I was leaning towards as a philosophy as well, because I think also the stereotype of someone who has fired means that you're laying on the beach somewhere for like 365 days, and not doing anything. I think for me, going back to the structure thing, right, where I wanted to make sure that I wasn't just doing the beach thing. I mean, the beach thing is nice, we can have vacations and stuff. But the full stack framework, it's a bit dorky, where in terms of the word stack, it actually means strength. So this means your physical strength, taking care of your body, your financial strength, which is, obviously something that's very important for everybody listening in here. And then even in terms of your mental strength, so being able to take on, if your job is, if you've got like a really toxic boss, right? Like how do you build that resilience to that?
So it's multidimensional.
Yeah, it's multidimensional. I think even in terms of like the layers. The T in stack for thinking. So how do you make your decisions? How do you make sure that, you are running through your mental models and making sure that, this is an okay decision that you can commit to, and how you can course correct if you are, if you think this experiment is sort of going haywire, right? How do you rescue yourself from that? A for alignment. I think that's obviously a really important thing. As human, or rather as humans, we need to find our purpose. We need to find what our values are. So just living in accordance of that. C for connection. I think, building a community, what your legacy could be like for people around you, the people that you love, and then K for knowledge for me.
Right, and maybe tell us a little bit about how you arrived at this framework, right? Because from what you've been talking about so far, actually I'm hearing a lot about experimentation and sort of developing that self-knowledge, right? Like you said, the minimum viable freedom is something that requires consistent iteration. So for your full stack model, what was the thinking that's underlying it, and how did you arrive at that?
And again, this is something that is borrowed very heavily from product. So full stack, right? It's something that developers have if they can look across, say, the front end and the back end.
Right.
So the way that I was looking at it was really about, I think I came up with this as I was trying to do a performance review for the team. So this was obviously back when I had a job, and I had to look after the team and how they're growing. So looking in terms across the areas of growth that one can have in their design career. And I was like, how is it that we don't have something of a framework like this for your own life? Right? How are we spending so much time and energy and a lot of emotions about building another person's vision of a product or another person's business, for example. But at the end of it, I think you are your most important product, right? And so that was sort of the start of me thinking of how to synthesize all of these things. I'm obviously also a very heavy consumer of like personal development content. So just thinking of what makes up the different dimensions of life.
Right.
I also remember the moment when I was writing all of this down, and I realized the acronym was able to work, and I was like, oh, this was I was
it's a bit of an accident.
It was a bit of an accident, yeah, and it could have very easily been like stick or something. So I was really happy to figure that and unlock that, and it's also easier to explain what the different layers and how I'm looking at it for my life, like whether I'm over-indexing on a certain layer, and not doing something, for example, for my physical health, right? And then once you know something, you can do something about it.
Yeah.
Assuming this is something you currently apply to your own life, how is that working out?
It is as you said, everything's an experiment. So I've tried a lot of things. I've tried to have a huge dashboard of all of the different things that in my life. Trying to attribute and quantify the number of am I happy? Am I all of these different things. And then I realized obviously a quantified self is a really good thing if you're someone who's really into looking at data, but it was also getting a bit finicky for me, and at the end of the day I don't want to necessarily be like I'm scoring a 4 today.
Yeah, because I do wonder whether it is possible to overdo that.
Yes,
right,
it was.
Where it gets to a point where you're optimizing for quantifiable outcomes as opposed to are you actually happy or not.
Yes. Yeah. So I think right now I've done that, right? I've done the in this area this is like a 3, this is like a 4, and you've got like a spider chart of like things. The iteration right now is really I have a daily, nightly review. So basically just looking at what a memorable experience was for me today. If I can, I would try to attribute it to the different layers. But I will also just be, how would I rate my day? So that's like on a daily basis, so that I can actually see when I'm reviewing on a week, on a month, and then finally in a year, like how that has been looking like. So that is, I guess, like the most actionable thing I've been using for the full stack.
Right.
Yeah, but I think it would also work for, say, a heuristic evaluation, like right at the start, right? And something that you can see tracked over time, but also not so militantly that you're doing like
Right.
every day or like to the hour doing that. Yeah.
Yeah. So, correct me if I'm wrong. So you said that you left your job 2024,
Yes.
end of 2024. So it's been about 8 or 9 months
Ish. Yeah.
thereabouts
Yes.
that you've kind of been financially free. Do you foresee yourself sort of kind of going down this path for a long period of time, or do you foresee yourself like maybe going back to work at some point?
Yeah, it's something that I've been also grappling with, right? So, what good work and what meaningful work means for me. I think for sure, right, I wouldn't be going back to this corporate structure where, going back to those 12 to 15-hour days where I didn't have any time for me at all. I also think that, all of these different opportunities that come up that are beyond what I was doing before as a job. I think those are things that I want to be exploring versus like, going on LinkedIn every day, looking at job descriptions and trying to see if that's something that I want to be applying for, right? So yeah, I think for me as a person, it's also important to be doing something, right? And knowing that I am doing something meaningful.
Yeah.
So whether it's for one person, so
Yeah.
this is in terms of like, say, helping my friends with their finances, right?
Yeah.
So that's definitely outside the scope of my work as a design person. Or, if it's something where it's more community building, if it's trying to help more people figure out, their versions of minimum viable freedom or the
Yeah.
full stack life,
Yeah.
that's also up in the air. I think those are things that I am trying to work across to see what makes sense for me. Yeah. So I suppose this goes back to that constellation thing that we were talking about, right?
Yeah.
Where I'm viewing a lot of these things in terms of side quests that might turn into something bigger, but I'm also not afraid to commit to something if I feel like it's got legs, right? For example. But in the nature of like side quests, it might mean that it's there for a season, right? And it's not something that you do. It's not another 15-year career that I'm
Right.
committing to, right? I think it's also maybe a bit of serendipity, a lot of like seeing what other people need that I might be able to help with.
I mean, that kind of goes back to, how that can be applicable for other people, I think, is this concept of like mini retirement.
Yes.
Where you're not doing full fire, but you've saved up enough to maybe take a short break and to do these side quests
Yes.
and explore what other opportunities there might be out there for you. And rather than go full on fire, this could be another option that they can try, right?
Yeah.
If, let's
Yeah.
say you're kind of at this crossroads in life, you're not really happy, or you're not really satisfied with where you are, but you're not really sure what the next step is. This is something that they can also do, right?
Yes.
To then
Yeah.
find this minimum viable freedom for themselves. Yeah.
The different versions of that, maybe it's taking time for a sabbatical where you can figure out what you want to do,
Yeah.
right? Or maybe it's even more of a arrangement where you work, say, 4 days a week so that you could spend a certain amount of time in a week to do what you think you might want to do, right? It's about, it's not about this full thing that happens at the end, but
Yeah.
what you can build towards along the way as well, right?
Yeah.
I've been thinking about this as well. And when I was working, or when I had a corporate job, I was so full in on it, right? It was like 150% of my effort and time in it. I think things would have worked out a lot differently if I had taken, say, that 50% of that additional time to actually do what I'm doing right now, right? Could be that I could have found something, or I could have quit way earlier, for example, right? Or, I could have made an arrangement where I wasn't working so hard and so much and still being able to taste what your own defined freedom could look like.
Yeah. Okay. That's great to hear. But so anyway, the question I was gonna ask, right, is that I suppose there is an emotional dimension to this, right?
Yeah.
And I'm curious how you manage that. Because I'm sure, even though it sounds nice, financial freedom sounds amazing. But I'm sure there are moments where, you might be wondering, is this really the right path? What made me decide to do this? How do I know I will still want to do this? What if I never find work? What if I never make as much as I used to? These are tough questions to wrestle with. How do you navigate that for yourself?
I mean, I think it's about knowing what's important to me at this point in my life, which is, spending time with family. It's about trying to pursue something outside of a corporate, constraint, right? So for me, even if I never earn as much as I did, which, if I'm not seriously investing time in any of these pursuits, then I don't think I would ever actually hit the monthly income that I had when I quit. I think the trade-off is that what I don't earn in dollars, I'm earning in, a peace of mind, right? I'm earning in experiences, I'm earning in, dividends doesn't have to be about money. Dividends are what you've gone through, the memories that you are collecting along the way. Yeah. So, but yes, I mean, it is obviously something that I overthink and am anxious about. I think just because of the person that I am, right? But it's also trying to ground myself in knowing that money is not the be all and end all. There are other facets of things in your life that you can derive value out of.
Thanks so much for sharing that. And I guess coming to the end of the episode, I was just wondering if you have any advice for people who might be considering pursuing this path.
Actually, I think I'm going to be contrarian here, and I say if you're on the FIRE path and you are trying to accumulate a certain amount of money, I think you could recalibrate and know that you don't need that much to try what you are aiming for, right? You could take a sabbatical and try to figure out, if this is something that you are working towards the right direction. Yeah, because your enough is probably less than what you think.
I think one big takeaway from this conversation that I have is that, we put all these expectations on that number and the outcome. And then we think once we hit that, right, then my life, everything will be good. Everything will fall into place. But that's not necessarily
No,
the
not
case.
necessarily. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, that's my key takeaway also, because, I mean, it's so common to see the headline, right, which is like, oh, I hate FIRE, or like this person has gotten like 1 million by this age, and we look at the headline, we're like, oh, I wish that was me, but you don't realize that there's actually so much that goes beyond that.
Yeah. And life happens before the number hits, right?
Right.
So you
Yes.
gotta, account for that.
Yeah, and life happens after as well.
Yeah.
so.
Yes.
Yeah. So thanks so much for joining us on this episode. Really wishing you all the best for the journey and looking forward to whatever surprises come your way.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So for those of you who enjoyed this episode, remember to like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. We'll see you at the next one.